Hello and welcome to the BurnCast. I'm Brady Byrne.
And I'm Kim Cass.
Today we're looking at a book called The Cost of Justice, Finding Justice by author Nova Drake. As always, any criticisms directed towards the authors of works that we discuss are exaggerated for entertainment purposes and are not meant to be taken personally. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy the show. Let's talk about The Cost of Justice, subtitle Finding Justice.
Yeah, let's talk about The Cost of Justice, subtitle Finding Justice, with our character, Justice.
Yes, and we're also going to talk a little bit about Planet Bowland, because that's the book we said we were going to be talking about this week in our last episode. And why is that, Kim?
Well, when we look for books, so you have to start out in this position. When we look for books, we start out in a position where we just don't know.
Yeah.
And you can't tell from the outside what a book's going to be like. It's that old saying, you can't judge a book by its cover. Now, we're trying to judge books by their cover and synopsis and their,
their name and their character names.
We try to get as much information out of it as we can, but unfortunately, that doesn't do it a lot of the time.
Yeah, and sometimes the books we think are going to be interesting from the first two chapters end up being
drivel. Just word-on-word bullshit.
And in the case of Planet Bowland, impenetrable.
Yeah, it's one of these books where you start reading and it's just like ramble. There's no coherent story or anything. Yeah. It's just like someone typing and typing and typing and typing and typing and typing with no end in sight. And there's just no clemency. There's no thought. There's no does this sentence work? No. It's all in. It all goes.
But Planet Bowland's a strange one because it does have somewhat of a story. It did have a few characters in it and it had different factions. It was about a futuristic space colony or something and their struggle to cross cultural bounds. But we read 30% of it and I can't tell you a single thing about it.
No.
Nothing.
It's like a cipher. It's some sort of thing where you're reading, but you're not getting the message.
Yeah.
If you knew the keywords or the triggers, then you would I understand, but you can't understand it because you don't know how to read it.
No, all I know is that there was a struggle between some people called the Uplanders and
the Bowlanders.
Yeah, and some of them were cybernetically enhanced and there was a character named John White. That's it.
But it was especially frustrating because the first few pages are just people sitting on a cliff, looking out and thinking about history of the place, and it just keeps on going and going and going, and you're like, that's not how stories work. Yeah, imagine if Moana started up with the chick sitting there on the beach thinking about 10 years of history and about how all this shit happened.
Yeah, and it's not it was a bunch of exposition that you need to understand to get grips with the sci-fi world. It was topographical information, and over there, the plains turned into this big rim, and down there was the bowl where the Bowlanders lived, and they were good at commerce and industry and miners.
Yeah, but they didn't really know what happened outside of the cliff, and the cliff was 6,000 feet high, and you just couldn't get over it, and it was such a big cliff.
Yeah, okay, what's happening, though? That was the first 30% of the book, and we couldn't pull anything out of it, so we said we're not going to talk about that.
Yeah, and it's disappointing.
Yeah.
Because you do read 20% of a book. We usually get 20, 25% in a book, and we're just okay, this just isn't going to work. We're just going to sit there and just rend. Yeah. We're just going to basically throw up, and it's not going to be very entertaining.
No.
There has to be some... I always try to think about it as now that we've looked at a few books, it shouldn't be that obvious that the story is so bad, but it should give you hints that the story is a little bit wacky.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it interesting, because we want a story that actually goes somewhere, but has some absolutely insane premises or ideas.
Yeah.
Usually it's more about the author because, the story is sort of mirroring the author's ideas. So, you get to know the person a little bit.
Yeah, it's sort of this overconfidence that they think they've created this insanely intricate world, and it's like a blade of Oxy, and it's just a complete misfire.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's brilliant. That's so amazing to read.
Yeah.
However, this is just, it's like reading someone's scribbles. It's just...
Yeah.
You shouldn't pay any attention to something that someone hasn't paid any attention to in the making of.
Yeah. So we threw that one out, and we picked up another book that's also not The Cost of Justice. We picked up a book called The First Poet Laureate of Mars.
Now, this one I had high hopes for.
Yeah.
I really thought the premise was silly. I thought, why the fuck does Mars need a poet? I guess the basic idea was that, Mars has been colonized and they just need a poet for some reason.
They're like a budding society, and they're looking to have a sort of intellectual base, and they hire this lady who has never written a poem in her life. She takes like a poem from the present day or shortly before, and it's many years in the future, and she basically plagiarizes it.
Yeah.
And they don't have any records of this poem, so they're like, hey, this is a great poem. You're the poet laureate of Mars now.
Which is totally how that would go, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like some no-name person plagiarizes like an age-old thing, and then without any education, knowledge, or any other thing, they're just like, all right, you're going to be the top poet for our whole planet.
Yeah, and we didn't see how that really played out because, again, we read like 30% of it and nothing had really happened, and there wasn't a lot to talk about.
No, I want to say that sometimes when you write a book, you can lose yourself in the creation of it without actually progressing the story,
Yeah.
It's like you can write lots and lots and lots, but you're actually not progressing the story in any meaningful way. Every chapter should do something.
Yeah.
Every interaction, every sentence should give you some information, or at least describe the scene in some way.
Yeah. And I think in the case of that book particularly, it's confusing a premise with a story because they're not the same thing. A premise is something that you launch a story from, maybe, but just a lady plagiarizes a poem and goes to Mars, like, that's not a story.
No.
That's the start of a story.
Yeah, that's like the inciting incident.
But we got well into the story and nothing had happened yet.
No.
So we threw that one out too, and we found The Cost of Justice, Finding Justice.
Now, we were originally intrigued by the idea that this person had put the justice word in 3 times.
Yeah.
You've got The Cost of Justice, and then the subtitle, Finding Justice, and then the character's name is Justice.
Yes. And not only is her name Justice, her name is Justice Cost.
That's just too good to pass up, right? Like, I don't even care what the fucking story is. If you're gonna bang me on the head so hard with a fucking verbal nail as to say that, like, your character's name is Justice Cost, like, oh man, what is this justice gonna cost? It's like, man, all right, you got us. We're in. We're gonna read the book.
Yeah. And now her last name isn't revealed until like halfway through the book either. So we were going off that silly title and subtitle. And then it was only when I got like halfway in that they're like, who are you really? And she's like, Justice Cost. Oh man, that's what we knew this one was going to be a winner.
Yeah, and I thought, what was also on the flip side kind of disappointing about the name is that in the first few like chapters, or maybe just in the first chapter, she refers to herself as Justice. But then pretty much throughout the entire book, she's Jess.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, what the fuck?
It's almost like either the author or the character in the book, Kat, her friend, who calls her Jess, like knows that the name Justice is too silly to actually use all the time. So they just call her Jess.
Yeah, and like, it's a little bit annoying because if you're gonna name your character Justice, even if it's just a nickname, and then like the entirety of the book, she's not called Justice, then well, what the fuck? What? Yeah, like, what's the point of that hook?
Yeah.
What's the point of that little, caveat? You've thrown in her name is Justice, but you're not actually going to use that.
Yeah. Now, we have this silly title, we have this silly character name. But when I started reading this, I was starting to think,
hey, this is good.
It's almost like the female version of Hard Target.
Yeah.
She's this badass, like, bounty hunter chick in a post-apocalyptic future where basically everyone is a thief and a murderer.
Yeah, it's all rugged.
Yeah, it's dark and gritty.
You gotta watch yourself outside, because everyone on the outside of these, like, pockets of civilization, I guess you could call them, are basically, like, decrepit ghouls, basically animals, and you gotta go into these, like, corners of society where, like, there's the underground and the elite cities and things like that.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, I was a little bit annoyed by the fact that you've got this rugged post-apocalyptic world, and then it's just like, there's also these big cities and the US government and the cops, and she's trying to intertwine things that don't really mix. She's like talking about police injustice and things like that. But also, whenever she walks on the street, she gets attacked and mugged by, like, vicious ghouls,
Yeah, almost like every single scene, like 5 times in the first 2 chapters.
Yeah, it's little girl versus big boy, girl wins all the time.
Basically, yeah.
It's like, why are you complaining about police justice when the streets are, like, literally filled with rabid, animalistic, like, half people, It's just like, maybe the police have got pretty tough job dealing with all the rampant muggings going on, and they just can't deal with your problems right now.
Yeah, now Justice Cost is a badass by all accounts. It's always talking about how Justice didn't pander to the unspoken rules. She marched through the familiar crumbled streets at her own pace in her well-torn combat boots. And it's always talking about how the people on the streets, they're not monsters, just empty souls so immersed in the savagery of the world that they no longer existed without it. Their humanity being ripped away piece by piece until all that was left was a cruel drive to subsist at any cost. A sad reality. It was only one more ugly piece of what the world had become. And it's like, all right, laid it on pretty thick there, but, it works.
Yeah, it works. It worked for the initial pass, it worked.
Yes.
Again, the beginning of the story is good. It seems like the author went through and double-checked the beginning, made sure that it was fleshed out, and I was really hooked in.
Yeah, it's punchy, it gets you right into the theme and the setting.
But then the rest of the story falls apart. Like,
almost instantly.
Yeah, it falls apart in a bad way. Like, it repeats itself again and again. Like, I mean, you're basically putting it on fucking replay, to be honest. Like, the same scene, almost.
Yeah, almost every other scene, or every scene, pretty much, she's just, like, walking through the town. She sees some guys beating up on a small girl or a small guy, and she, like, instantly intervenes because she's looking for a fight.
Yeah.
She loves to fight. She goes to the underground, which is like this seedy, exclusive, grimy place, and she gets into the fighting ring and stuff, and she really lives for, like, getting the shit beat out of her, and she does. She's not invincible. She gets, like, her limbs broken, she gets cut up a lot, stabbed, shot, burned, whatever. And she's constantly on the verge of collapse, and she's still fighting everything she sees.
And I find this frustrating. And we run into a lot of, like, what you might call badassery.
Yeah.
Right? Because it is a trope. You have this character who just doesn't give a fuck. Like, he doesn't give a fucking fuck about not shit, man. Fucking Justice or Jess or whatever the fuck you want to call it. She just whips out throwing knives out of her fucking ears and just throws them into people like crazy. Yeah. She just whips out 100 fucking throwing knives at every scenario and just like, here's a knife in your shoulder, here's another one, and have another one, like...
Yeah.
And so we deal with a lot of badassery. But the idea of being a badass shouldn't be that you can just take anyone out, or, like, that you make reckless decisions. No. That's not what being a badass is about. It's about a mentality. It's about carrying yourself in a certain way. And these books miss the mark so badly every time. Like, the people don't seem like a badass, they just seem like an asshole. Like, they just seem like an arrogant piece of shit that just, the only way to prove yourself is in a fist fight. Like, as if that's the only way.
Yeah, and Justice as a character is obsessed with her reputation as a badass.
Yeah!
It's all she cares about for, like, the first part of the book.
It is just about street rep. And she runs into other people and she's like, what's your rep? Oh, you got a pretty big rep out there.
Yeah, I'll fucking kill you now so my rep takes over, like...
Yeah, it's all about that street rep.
But then there's always this, like, well, she's just a girl, so everything she does has to be twice as hard, and she doesn't get the good jobs from the bounty reps and stuff, and it does have this mentality of, like, she constantly meets these big buff dudes, and they're just like, hey, you little bitch, like...
Yeah, little girl, hi, little doll,
and and she stands up to them, like, better not underestimate me, I'll pull knives out my fucking boots and my underwear and toss them through your shoulder, and she does.
Just... And she does over and over.
And that's a fun theme to play with, kind of like badass female warrior who people underestimate. But the instant she meets a hot guy, she, like, crumbles into a quivering mess of lust.
Yeah.
Especially considering the guy that she kind of falls for throughout the story who she just calls creepy guy, because he is quite creepy. He just kind of shows up wherever she is, and everyone seems scared of him.
Yeah.
And he's like kind of following her around and protecting her of some sorts, and she's kind of questioning this. She's wondering, what does this creepy guy have an interest in me for? I don't need anyone. I don't trust anyone because, I live by the streets.
Yeah, street rape.
And like, anytime he gets close to her, he like pins her arms to the wall because she's just kind of fighting him. And she's like, oh my God, I need to get away, but fuck, he's so hot. Like, oh,
Oh, he's a thotty, but he's a hottie. Like,
yeah, she's a character who supposedly never lets her guard down and doesn't trust people. But not only does she not have any reason to trust this creepy guy because he barely talks, what reason does she have to fall for him other than he's attractive?
Nothing.
Like, you've instantly stripped down all of the heroism and esteem that you've admittedly given to this character in the first part of the book.
Yeah.
By making her completely fall apart the second she meets a hot guy who, by all accounts, is, like, constantly referred to as emotionless. Like, he's just a shell.
Yeah.
He just has cold, emotionless eyes, doesn't smile, doesn't talk. She says that he has the personality of a rock. And that is what cripples her.
Yeah, what the fuck is this?
There is nothing to his character until like 80% of the book when he is given the slightest amount of development and he has a semi-tragic backstory. But it's not like that's when she starts to fall for him and she realizes that this cold, emotionless shell actually has some depth behind it.
No,
she is into him like from the start. The first time she's like, man, that guy's really creepy, but boy, do I want to fuck him.
Oh yeah, big time.
But so all of this stuff is built up to like show you that her edges are extremely hardened and she's closed off and she doesn't get close to anyone because there's no reason to trust anyone. And yet the major plot of this book is that she ends up with creepy guy. And the scene where he like helps her out after she meets one of these ghouls who burns her and she's feeling vulnerable and, all of her hard exterior is wearing down a bit. And she just like kisses him.
Yeah.
And he's like, why are you kissing me? His voice was low and growly and it made her insides purr with want. And she says, well, I kind of like you and you're kind of hot. Is it that big of a deal? It's like, this is our badass? Like, this is our highly concerned about trusting and getting close to people badass. And she goes on to say that the chemistry between her and Creepy, which is what she calls him, was something she'd never experienced before. What fucking chemistry? The guy has like 5 lines of dialogue in the whole fucking book, and he is literally just a hot piece of meat.
Yeah, I love these lines where like, it's like, she's looking into his like soulless black eyes. And she just couldn't take her eyes off him. And it's like, what? Like, sorry? Did you?
It's a bit of a contrast.
Why couldn't she take her eyes off him?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck? And there's even a fucking rain scene where they're standing in the rain and he twists her arm behind her and they're like standing pressed up against one another and it's just like they're breathing into each other's mouths.
Oh my God, yeah.
And it's so like, what the fuck? As if this would ever fucking happen. What is this? Am I supposed to believe this intense romance is happening in this rugged street environment? Like, I thought every time you walk down the street, you were close to getting raped and or mugged.
Yeah, it's disappointing because I was enjoying this story up until those elements.
Yeah, I was. Like,
she's got all this shit going for her. There's enough of her character for me to be interested and follow it to the end. But it's all torn down in favor of typical powerless female fantasy romance bullshit.
Yeah, and it's really disappointing in that way, because, like, there was a story here.
Yeah.
There was a story here somewhere. In the beginning, there was a story, and you just threw it away. You just threw it away because you need some fantasy in there.
You need some steamy sex scenes in there.
It's really disappointing. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about the writing. The writing in the beginning, again, seemed really good. It seemed like, hey, this person's actually got some stuff to them. They're not making mistakes, and they are describing the scene, and there's some metaphors in there, and I like the description.
Yeah.
And then after we got through that more fleshed out beginning, it began to fall apart in a big way.
Yeah.
Began repeating itself. You get this ice cold chill down the spine over and over and over and over again. You get this boy versus girl like action scene fight again and again and again and again.
And she does the same things. It's not like she approaches every combat scenario in different ways. No, it's always like a big guy twice as big as her underestimates her. She throws knives at him. She comes out with a broken finger or whatever, and then she limps off into the dusk.
Yeah, and either the guy saves like picks her up or whatever, or something similar.
Yeah, the fights she can't win, creepy guy just kind of scoops her up and saves her.
Yeah.
So as far as the story goes, there's really not too much going on.
Yes.
Between the scenes where she's fighting random people on the streets, she's looking for her brother who was kidnapped after some traumatic experience in her childhood, and she suspects that it might be related to these drug trials. There's this whole subplot where some kind of special drug trial went wrong and some people got affected in strange ways, and it gives them some powers and some strengths. People might be kidnapping people and using them to experiment and give them powers.
Yeah.
Over time, she fights these street thugs, and she encounters some of these weird monster people. Some of them, like, shoot lightning or whatever and are made of smoke or something like that. And she finds out that creepy guy is also one of these. And
he can sort of read minds or whatever?
Yeah, he can read minds, or he can read, like, the surface of her mind, like just what she's thinking right now or something. And this is how he has been following her around. There's no reason why he's interested in her.
No.
At the start of the story, it's building up like she's getting in these fights, and then creepy guy will show up, and all the people she's fighting will like see him and get scared and run off. So she's like, oh wow, he's got a rep. You know?
He's got a street rep, yeah.
He must be like some high-level gang member or something. I gotta find more about that. No.
No, you don't ever get to find out more about that. No, never.
No, he has that rep because he's super powerful and super attractive, and people are scared of him.
Yeah, but not as if like he's taken out some people, some notable characters, or done something extremely savage to someone in full... Like, there's no reason for any of these... It's just... Oh, wow, look at him. His black hair is hanging over his face. He's like sort of...
Yeah, his muscles have muscles. That's an actual line from the book.
Like, it's just so fucking stupid. Like, there's no other way to say it.
Well, it's just not thought out well. You know, if you're juggling themes of, like, corrupt justice, you know, there's a whole subplot with, like, the police department. She sneaks into the police department, and she's trying to get some files, and she meets one cop who's kind of clean.
Cash. That's Cash.
Yeah, she meets a guy named Cash, and, again, the only reason she even talks to him is because he's attractive.
Yeah.
And they have a couple scenes where they're stuffed in a closet together, and, you know...
It's heated. Her
chest bumps up against his rippling abs, and she loses all composure because that's a good character.
Yeah.
And he helps her try and get these files, and she's looking for her brother. There are these monsters, and in between those scenes, she fights people.
Yes.
There's only one other little subplot where she, like, takes in a street kid or something, and then that kind of goes nowhere.
Yeah, I didn't get that whole part.
I think the idea here is, and it's always talking about how, you know, she's getting softer. She sees that she was this brutal, street cred badass, and over time, she's, like, letting people go, not just, like, killing them. She starts, like, letting herself be a bit more friendly with this waitress who she talks to from time to time. It's not really leaned more towards whether that's a good thing or a bad thing that she's letting people in, because it's harder to survive in this society. But she's also, like, losing her wits and her combat capabilities over the story. So she is kind of having, like, this downward arc, but that's not resolved.
No.
She doesn't, like, hit rock bottom, and then the story ends and we can see her pick her up next time. She's, like, still on her way there at the end of the book.
Yeah, she's still falling.
Because the second book is called Justice Lost, and it begins by further pushing this character down and down and down, and it's like, why isn't that the ending of this book? Why did you cut it off and then start your next book on the very same scene?
Like, I wanna put it like this. It's so difficult, actually, to analyze these books.
It can be, yeah.
It can be so difficult. This person is good. If I were to pick out a single paragraph, right?
Yeah.
I would say, oh, that's good writing. You know, that's a perfectly fine little paragraph of whatever. You know, it's a good line of dialogue. It's a good little paragraph there, a good description. But as soon as you pile up those paragraphs, it falls apart. And as soon as you have chapters and chapters, it just becomes a mess.
Yeah.
And as soon as you have a whole book, it's absolute nonsense. You know, it's not a story. The character isn't aligned with anything. The character doesn't fit into the surroundings. She doesn't fit in with her backstory, and she doesn't fit in with what's happening right now. Why would she get soft? I mean, she's constantly fighting people. This character has no reason to soften up at all. She's just like, I'm really getting a little bit soft, and it's like, why? Why? Like, you're literally getting fucking, like, bludgeoned up, you're getting stabbed up, all these bad things are happening to her, and she's like, I'm getting soft now. Like, so what?
And I think the idea there is that she really is this soft person underneath her hard exterior, but the world has made her this way. And her window into her inner self is Creepy Guy and also Kat, the waitress, who show her that people do care about her, she can trust them, and she can be free to be a little more herself, open up her emotions a little bit. That's the core idea of this character's arc. But the way that's done is, like, so superficial.
Yeah.
I mean, again, there's no reason why she would soften up for Creepy Guy. He's just hot. There's no reason, really, why she should soften up to Kat. Kat is just, like, the only person who's nice to her. They don't have any, like, personality similarities or, like, interesting dialogue. They just kind of chat a little bit.
She just serves her coffee.
Yeah, and asks how she is and says that she cares about her, but there's never really a good bonding scene between them.
No.
Only one where Justice, or Jess, whatever, protects Kat's diner from some muggers and looks after her little brother or something.
Yeah, wait. Let's talk about the waitress. Can we talk about the waitress, please?
We can talk about the waitress.
I thought this was a post-apocalyptic town, or city or whatever, and she just rocks up to this fucking, like, casual-ass diner whenever she wants to with this, like, lonely girl there named Kat and her younger brother, who's just like a street kid or whatever. And she goes in for coffee, you know? She just goes in for a coffee.
Yeah.
And it's like, what the fuck? Like, where is this diner? I thought, like, the street was being hounded by ghouls and sort of, like, overrun by savage beasts.
Yeah, and it's kind of isolated from all that stuff.
Yeah, and she just rocks up and she's like, can I get a coffee, please? Like, oh, what's wrong, baby? Like, oh, Kat, oh my god, my day was so terrible. Like, and it's like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, and it's kind of explained that, like, it's frequented by the cops, but it's like, where do the cops fit into this?
Yeah, why are they out here?
You have this whole corrupt cop organization who protect all these gang members and stuff. And so they kind of run shop on the streets. But what about, like, these ghouls who are overrunning?
Yeah.
You're like, what are the fucking corrupt cops doing about that? Nothing. Like,
it's like, well, okay, so the streets are not, like, safe enough to even tread.
Yeah.
And yet you still have this, like, petty street corruption of cops going on, as if they, like...
It's a little bit of an imbalance there, yeah.
Yeah. It's like she combined two ideas that weren't, like... She's like, post-apocalypse. Okay, I want post-apocalypse.
Yeah, I want, like, magic.
Yeah, I want, like, sort of sci-fi, like, badassery, you know, like, people whipping out guns and knives and...
But I also want a semi-grounded detective story.
And it's like, okay, well, you can do those things, but if you want to do a detective story, then you have to create a scenario where, like, the cops are actually the people that can solve crimes, or, like, that crime isn't so rampant that someone can just get raped and or killed on the street and it's not even, like, glimpsed at, you know?
Yeah.
And, like, her whole backstory, the main character's whole backstory is that her, like, parents got killed, you know?
Yeah.
Like, her parents got iced, and, like, the detective came and was a total dick about it, like, didn't give a fuck about it.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, but she is nearly getting killed and shit on the streets, like, every time she walks out. It's if, like, the cops are checking up on every single murder in this city. What's so significant about her family murder that makes the cops interested in that? Why would they even go out to the city slums to check up on some random murder case?
Yeah, she harbors all of this resentment about the corrupt police organization, but it's like, what do you expect when there's, like, thousands of murders committed every day in this world.
Yeah, like, you can't paint me a world where, like, you know, the streets are rampant with the mindless throngs, you know, and then be like, oh, but the cops don't give a fuck about my murder case, you know. It's like, well, what the fuck do you expect, yo? Like, and then she's like mad at this guy Cash. Like, she's mad at Cash because he's a policeman, and it's like, Cash some fucking slack, yo. Like, he's a fucking cop in this crazy world, you know?
And he seems to be the only one trying to at least do, like, regular cop shit.
Yeah. I mean, as if regular cop shit even exists in this world. Like, it even says they are basically judge, jury, executioner. It has that line in this book. It says they function as judge, jury, executioner. This is a man who is murdering people on the street.
Yeah.
You know, he's just basically like a street fighter, and he's not going to dig up your 10-year-old case.
No.
He's not going to go back and, like, try to figure out who murdered your parents. Not when every fucking neighborhood is controlled by some sort of Devil's Creek gang or Devil's Death gang or some sort of combination of that. Like, what the fuck? Like, yeah, it just doesn't really make much sense. You can't relate to any of the characters in this. Again, like, you're just sitting there watching insane people talk to other insane people, and they don't end up anywhere in particular that's anything interesting. So, again, we have a disappointing ending in this book. But before we touch on the ending, I guess that we should really talk about something that poisoned me to this book quite quickly, which is when you're writing, right? Things have to have purpose, you know? You write a chapter to progress the story, and a lot of the times these chapters don't do anything. They're just like...
fight scene.
Yeah, they're basically a fight scene, but they also run on exactly from the other chapter. Basically, someone can be having a conversation, and the chapter will cut right in half the conversation and continue in the next chapter.
Yeah. Why are you making it a new chapter?
Yeah, why are you making a new chapter there? That's not how chapters work. That's not what chapters are for. You're dividing a story into pieces so that people can stop and start at different points.
Or if you need a convenient change of location or time or perspective.
Or a pace or, any of these things. Yeah, that's what you need chapters for. And so again, you have your writing tools, your toolbox. And she's basically taken a hammer to a plane of glass, you know? Like, she's used the wrong tool for the wrong thing, and it's ruined the ever. Like, it's fucked it all up, you know? And you have to be careful. You have to be very careful, you know, because you've written a whole book. You've written a whole book, and you've taken the hammer, and you've smashed it in the wrong places. Like, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to write a whole book if you're not going to make it good, right?
Yeah.
So, to any budding authors out there, you know, before you write your story, you know, maybe check up on what chapters are used for. Like, just maybe, you know, maybe check up on what that's for. You know, maybe, you know, this isn't the only thing she's done wrong in this book in the general writing sense. I find it incredibly frustrating when you have a piece of dialogue like, tell me what you want, and then you have another line in the narrative directly after that just says, he really wasn't telling her what she needed to know, and that was extremely frustrating. And it's like, why the fuck are you writing things twice? Like, either tell me in dialogue, but don't do it twice. Don't do it like that, please.
Yeah, there is a lot of repetition in this.
And that's painful. It's painful, it's difficult, it's not nice. It's like swallowing shards of glass that you've...
smashed with the hammer.
Yeah, you smashed it up with a hammer, and now I'm swallowing it, and that's not good.
Now, I would say, kind of like All Your Ruins, this book isn't fundamentally unfixable.
No, I wouldn't say so.
It's too long because there's a lot of repeated stuff. There's a lot of random fight scenes that you could just take out.
You could probably cut out 3/4 of this book.
Well, yeah, I mean, you've got about 1/4 of the actual plot. Now, another quarter would be character development, and it is fair to show, you know, a few fight scenes.
Yeah.
Like the beginning, when she goes to the underground and, you know, it shows that she's looking for these fights.
I was fine with that. I was on board.
That's sold me on your character from the beginning.
Yeah, I needed that, yeah.
That she's looking for action. She's looking for a way to disconnect from her life. She needs a way to fit into this gruesome thrall society.
And kicking everyone's ass is how she's going to do it. I got it. Yeah, I'm in.
Yeah, and you've got me. You've got me with the hook, that first chapter.
Yeah.
and then you've basically just recycled the content of that chapter like 20 more times, and then you're like, sprinkle on a little bit of narrative at the end with creepy guy and this kid she takes in and the drug, and it's like, where did all this come from?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think many people experience this when they read a book, but it's like the sapping of your energy. Like, you're reading it and you're like, you know that your predictions of, hey, maybe this is good, like, slowly it eats away at you. Your energy is ebbing out and out and out as you read more and more, and you're like, oh god, this is just gonna keep going like this, isn't it?
And I would say my main takeaway from this is disappointment.
Oh yeah.
Now, I wasn't disappointed at Blade of Oxia because I wasn't expecting anything good from it to begin with.
You what? You what? Question mark?
No, after like the first couple lines, I already was like, all right, this is not set up in a good way. So I'm not expecting the rest of it to carry on in a good way. The Cost of Justice had a great intro. It had a great character. It had a nice atmosphere, decent dialogue, decent prose, things sprinkled in that you think are going to play out in interesting ways. But that's kind of all it had. And so as I go through the story, I'm finding myself saying, oh man, I wish this carried on from the first chapter instead of just being the first chapter over and over again.
Yeah. It's funny because, like, there were no super, super cringy parts like in Pirates of Tropica where you've got this, like, incest theme, which is just, like, you're, like, sitting there sweating, like, while reading it going, please don't get too much into that. Please don't continue that line. And you've got nothing like this in this book. And I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. Like, at least when I'm reading Pirates of Tropica, I'm like, oh god, please don't do that. Next chapter, please don't talk more about your mom or sister in the next...
Yeah, you're almost engaged by hoping the story doesn't turn out like that. That you're like, I gotta get through this so I can see if it doesn't happen.
But in this, it's like, there's nothing so, like, taboo in the story that it's really intriguing or anything like that.
No, it's not really taboo. It's just ripping away the good aspects of your character that you've built up in favor of steamy romance scenes. And there's no real ending. She doesn't find her brother. The little boy that she takes in off the street gets kidnapped, and she finds him in this drug lab, and she is attacked by someone at the lab, and she passes out, and that's the end.
Yeah. Now, I do want to find... Yeah, it's the shittiest ending. Like, I have to say this. I actually double read the ending, because I was reading pretty quickly through the whole thing. I was like, okay, let's go.
Yeah, I've seen this scene already before.
Seen this scene, yeah. Fight.
Throw some knives. Weird scene with creepy guy.
Yeah, creepy guy, okay.
Fight some ghouls.
And then there's some drugs, but that's not gonna happen. Like, okay, so...
She gets her coffee, and blah, blah, blah.
She gets her coffee, blah, blah, blah. And then it gets to the end, and she doesn't beat the bad guy, she doesn't do shit, she just gets knocked out. And then we have the epilogue. Now, epilogues. Why have we got an epilogue?
Is this really an epilogue, though? This is more like a sneak peek at the next book. It reads more like, hey, this is the first paragraph of the book you're going to read next time.
But it's literally just like carrying on from where she is right now. Like, it's literally like she gets knocked out by, these guys, and then she's just like waking up and realizing it in this next scene. Yeah, isn't that kind of insulting? You haven't finished the story, and you've given me the next book, like, preview at the next book. Maybe you'll see the end of the story in this book, but I haven't sold it to you here, so just buy the next one, all right? Maybe you'll get it.
Yeah, and it's a similar idea to what I said about Pirates of Tropica, which is that a cliffhanger is a kind of ending, but it needs to be structured in a way that your ending doesn't just precede the beginning of your next story. It is also an ending by itself. Now, it alludes to what's going to happen, but it needs some sort of conclusion.
Yeah, no, like, I think what you really mean is that a cliffhanger should be the story ends, yeah? And then after the story ends, then you get an extra little bit of, or did they?
Yeah.
Like, you get that little bit of, like, but maybe, But the story should run all the way to the final conclusion. The guy cuts off the zombie's head, and they're all like, wow, we did it. We cut off the zombie's head. The zombie head rolls to the floor.
They walk away, and then the eyes open or something.
Oh, the eyes open on the zombie. And I was like, ooh, is it going to get... Yeah, that's...
You've given me your resolution, but you've left something open to continue with. So it's like you've got the ideas there. The author understands that the character is on this journey and they know what the arc should be, but they've lost the message in the execution in favor of some of the typical things you might find in a genre like this, which is like dumb romance and action scenes. Like you were on the verge of making something good here.
Yeah.
And because you hesitated and you felt to include those things instead, it really deteriorates the good amount of potential that this book had.
Yeah. It's funny because we began saying that this was kind of like the female hard target, you know? It was the female specialist.
Yeah.
But the hard target runs like this. This guy is a badass, and he's going to go kill this guy. And he does that. And he doesn't let anything get in his way. And he just shoots up people, and it doesn't tell you that there's going to be any romance, because that's not what this book is about. This book is a fucking bullet-by-bullet kill fest until he gets the bad guy.
Yeah.
And that's what you get. There's no flower in between. It's just, that's what it is.
Yeah.
This, I was expecting, like, oh, she's gonna knife fight her way out of this grueling society and get to the big city and stab the guy making the chemicals or something, you know?
Yeah.
And that's not what you get. That's not what you get.
No.
Instead, you get her knife fighting just because she's in the place, and she ends up getting her teeth knocked in and falling for some guy that she really shouldn't fall for, and story's over. No resolution. She didn't beat the bad guys. The chemicals are still out there. The bad guys are still out there. Nothing happens. Fuck it. Fuck you. Hand over the few bucks I get for the story. Thanks. Goodbye.
Buy the sequel to find out what happens
buy
next.
Buy the fucking sequel. Justice, lost, justice. Fuck off. Like, come on.
So, speaking of Hard Target, though, really quick, we actually have a new development in the Hard Target saga.
What?
Something I discovered a few days ago was that Hard Target is back online.
Right?
Now, it's with a strange caveat.
I mean, it's still going to be, it's Hard Target, right? I mean, it's...
I don't know, and we can get into this. Is this still the same? Because, one, the cover has changed in favor of something else. I wouldn't necessarily it's better or worse, but there's a major change to the way Hard Target is written now, which is taking everything in the book, which is narrated by the specialist, that used to be in past tense, and now it's in present tense. And I'll read a few lines from our version versus the new one to give you an example of that.
What? But wait. Why would they... I mean, it was good. It was fine.
Yeah. And so, it goes something like this. The very first line in our version, the one we read and reviewed for the show, says, I surged along a dark and winding road toward a rendezvous with death. And in the new version, it says, I speed along a dark and winding road toward a rendezvous with death. Lines like, my sidearm was in my fist, are now, my sidearm is in my fist. So the whole narrative has been changed to be completely present.
It's just a sad... I mean, it's just...
And now we can ask ourselves, why was this done? And I think maybe the reason for it is to try and make it even more punchy, which is like everything is happening right now. It's more immediate.
I can understand that, but that's not how that works.
No, it's not.
It's not. Things don't become more punchy because you put it in present tense.
No, it's actually more distracting. And
yeah.
There was nothing wrong with the Hard Target we read, except for some of the stupid stuff we talked about already in our review. But as far as the prose, that was the best part.
Yeah, it was.
And I really think that changing it from past to present doesn't really add much more. If anything, it's detracting.
No. It's a funny thing because, when you're talking about past and present and tense change, people love to talk about tense when they talk about writing, like, in terms of, I once saw this person write, like, no, I only write in third person. Anything else is shit. And it's like, oh, okay. Okay. And now they all have their place. Everything has its place.
Yeah.
But I think why it works, if we're specifically talking about Hard Target, is you're talking about quick action scenes, and it kind of seems like the narrator, who is also the specialist, is recalling the events.
Yeah.
He's telling you what happened, He's like, I fucking did this, and then I fucking did that, and I fucking shot that guy so good, and then this helicopter blade decapitated this other guy, and it was so fucking cool. And that's nice, that's nice. Yeah. It's nice to read.
Yeah, and if you want to get meta with it, I would say that in past tense, you might be thinking, well, this sounds like the specialist telling a story. And would someone like the specialist tell a story? Not really. But it really seems more like he's recalling the events for himself in his head.
Yeah.
Because it is all just kind of in his head. A lot of that book and a lot of his narration is introspection.
Yeah.
And so it does read a little bit like he's just kind of recalling events as they happen in his head. When it's in present, it's a lot more like he's telling you a story or he's telling someone else a story.
Yeah.
Because he's recounting the events as they play out. He's saying, I arrived at the Burvaja thugs gang. I get out my rocket launcher and I shoot them in the head, and it's like, that's more like recounting a story, despite it being in present tense. And I think that doesn't fit the specialist.
Everything's based on different settings and scenarios. In some cases it works, in some cases it doesn't work. So it's all about the story and the tempo and the pace, and all of those things play into how you should write it.
Yeah.
It's not something you can say like, oh, it works better this way or it works better that way, because it just doesn't. That's not how writing works. But in this particular case, you go from something that was really good. Well, I say really good, but just,
It was entertaining.
It was entertaining, yeah. And then it goes to something which, dare I say, is shit.
Yeah, and that's the question here is, a lot of our praise for Hard Target was about the author understanding his book and what its purpose was, what the character's purpose was, and how all those things link together perfectly, not in like an epic or a profound narrative way in any sense.
No.
But in a constructed level. Do we revoke that praise? As it seems Zeke Mitchell has misunderstood his own work.
Well, I guess I would say, we don't advocate the sale of many of these books. We don't tell people to go out and buy these books.
No, we don't.
But I would say that Hard Target, past tense, buy it. It's a fun read. It's genuinely entertaining. Present tense, don't. No.
Just leave it.
It's not worth it.
Listen to our review.
Yeah, listen to our review. You'll get all the good parts. Trust me. And you'll get it the way that the original author intended them to sound.
Yeah. So that was the cost of justice. Did we find justice or did we lose it?
I found out who Justice was, and I lost Justice. I lost her, and I don't want to find her.
Yeah.
I don't care for it. I don't want to know. I'm done. I'm done with Justice. Justice can be lost.
Perhaps the third book in the trilogy will be called Injustice.
Or Justice Found. But I'm not reading 2 more books to find out. Come on, Why do people why can't you just write a single book and just write a single story?
Just write an ending.
Just write an ending.
Please.
Why is that the hardest thing? Why you published a fucking book and you're not gonna give it a fucking ending, you're just gonna leave it halfway through? Why?
Because they see on Amazon that every book is like a 9-part series. And, they're writing these books once every 3 months.
But a 9-part series should be 9 different stories, not one story that's, just drawn out.
Yeah. Stop writing these books that end in the middle and calling that an ending.
It's fucking lunacy, guys. Stop it. Listen to our podcast and stop it. Stop doing it.
Whatever. The next book we're going to be looking at is called Powerful Fruit.
Who's that by? Who is it by? Can you tell me? Have you got a unequivocal answer to that question?
I can't tell you. I honestly can't tell you. The author's name on Amazon is Rent. Uncapitalized, 2 words, R-E-N-T space R-E-N-T. Now, I don't know what that means. It's very confusing.
I don't know what it means either. He's got a lot of books.
He's got a lot of books, and they are weird. And I don't mean like Johnson the Man is weird.
They seem what you might call artificial.
Yeah.
They don't seem produced by people. They seem like they are mimicry of books.
Yeah.
poor mimicry of a book by something that has no place writing books at all.
We are really confused at this moment whether Rent is a person or some sort of weird algorithm that takes text from other books on Amazon and compiles them into books, because the books are fucking weird. Like, Depth of Reality weird.
Yeah, they're all weird and they all don't make any sense. And we're going to dig a little bit into it and see if we can pull a few more puzzle pieces out of this Amazon mystery.
Yeah.
There really is a rainforest out there, and who knows what's going on, you know?
Yeah.
It really is crazy, and I'm not looking forward to it, to be honest. I'm not sure how much of this book I can actually read. I don't expect myself to be able to read 10% of it. I mean, it is basically nonsense, right?
It's a long book, and it is just a fucking ramble. Like,
yeah. But perhaps we can pull out a few little bits and pieces for the listeners to enjoy, and perhaps we can also discover a little bit more about what's going on. Are people generating these books just to trick others? Is it just some sort of wild experiment?
I don't know. Let me read you the very first words that appear, and you tell me if this sounds like it was written by a human or not. Quote, "The first chapter is the scathing Tyrannosaurus Rex. Update time 2009, 11/23, 11/10/03, words 3,103.
Okay. That sounds computer generated.
And let me read you another sentence. When Tyrannosaurus Rex entered a basement with the beautiful woman who had won the ticket, he turned to her and smiled at her. Color rabbit. Your requirements have been met. Now you should keep your promise. If the people in the dark water bar know that this beautiful woman is called Colored Rabbit, he will certainly scream, especially the evil ghost."
Okay.
So we're gonna read whatever the fuck this is.
It's like no one fucking cares, you know, like I'll fucking send an email to Amazon support and be like, yo, like, I know you don't give a fuck about this email, but you've got some bullshit on here and it's not cool, like, look at this shit, what is this? Why are you allowing this to be sold? This is not a product, this is a scam. Like, why? Thank you for your email.
But it seems like Amazon won't be doing anything of that sort anytime soon.
No.
So it is up to us.
The floodgates are open.
Yes.
And with the floodgates come all the shit, all the decapitated fish, all the nasty bits and pieces that normally would be filtered out by some sort of human interference. But no, those floodgates are open.
We are the floodgates.
we're if you can imagine floodgates opening and two people standing in front of the wall of water and going, guys, we need to stop this. We need to stop this water coming through.
That's us.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for listening and supporting the show. And please, if you can, support us on Patreon, and doubly so, share our podcast with your friends. It's a huge help, and thank you to all of those who already do that. If you have a book you want us to look at, share it with us on one of our platforms, and we'll consider it for the show. Thanks.